Welcome to Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change, the show that brings real conversations about fairness, compassion, and progress into our everyday lives. I'm Pooja Kothari, and each week I sit down with guests from all kinds of industries and backgrounds to talk about what equity looks like, not just in their work, but in their daily choices and personal journeys. Because building a more equitable world isn't just for academics, activists, or experts, it's for all of us. Every day, in big ways and small, we can choose to be more aware, more kind, and more connected. And this is where we learn how.
Hi, everybody. Welcome, Brianne. Okay, today we have on one of my favorite people, a close friend of mine, and somebody who I think is just the bee's knees, Brianne Brinker. Brianne is a former college ice hockey player, a starter at Kent State University. She's in the Kent State Hall of Fame. She was a college hockey coach for Division III, minor pro, and women's Division I, and she is currently and has been the assistant athletic director at Union College for the last 22 years. She's been featured on NPR and the 51% podcast and is the author of the memoir, Skating Out of the Vault, A Trans Woman's Escape from the Game of Masculinity. Welcome, Brianne. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you, Pooja, and I'm thrilled to be here.
So, is there anything I missed in that introduction? Anything that you want to kind of elaborate on? I
Other
mean,
than
being,
that, I'm a trans woman now,
yes.
which is kind of part of why I'm here. I didn't even catch on to that the first time.
That's right.
Kind of used to being a trans woman.
Yeah, yeah, right. And that really goes into, the memoir you just got published, which is fantastic. It's in our local bookstores in Brooklyn, New York, and I'm just really glad that everyone has the opportunity to read it and to buy it, and it's just really beautifully written. Can you tell us a little bit more about your memoir, what made you write it, and what got you started on it?
Sure. I came out 6.5 years ago now, and it sometimes seems like yesterday, but sometimes I'm just so used to being who I am after all those years. I was born in St. Louis, and I had the biggest thing that catapulted me to figure out I'm different than the other boys in my school or in the neighborhood is that I would watch shows. This is my earliest memory, and I would watch TV shows, and I would watch, the black and whites, and it would be Superman on there, Adventures of Superman. And you superimpose yourself, you see yourself as somebody on there. And I saw myself, yeah, I'd love to be Superman and beat up everybody and, tear things apart and save the pretty girl and everything else. And yet, at the same time, I wanted to be the pretty girl and thought, and I didn't realize it at the time, but, she had some just she was good at what she did, had a good job in those days. And so I didn't know how to put those two together. I thought I just didn't know. But I knew it was wrong, quote, wrong, the society that we were in. And I knew what the gender roles were. My father was a construction worker, tough, and, had to, drink beer a lot and things like that. And then my mother was a stay-at-home mom at the time. And so I knew the gender roles. I knew what was happening, and I paid attention to those as I got older. But I knew I couldn't tell a single soul about this. I knew that not one person I could say anything to. So that's where the metaphor of the vault comes in. Because people that are in the closet, and this happens all the time, you can turn the knob from the inside and you walk yourself out of the closet and you come out and you can be yourself. You're in a vault, a big bank vault. You've got all the dials and the levers and just different things on the outside. And I couldn't get to them. I wouldn't let myself get to them. And so the presence of the vault is there throughout the book, especially before I came out. So I wanted
Yeah.
to rewrite it because I wanted to tell my story because I feel it's naive to think that I'm one of the only athletes out there that number one is queer even, but number two is it was just an ex-player. I can't believe there's not any more of us. I can't be the only one in the history of athletics.
Complete.
It's just, it's just not true.
Yeah. Can you give our listeners a sense of what time period? So when you say you're growing up, and for those people who are just listening without the video, what year are we talking about?
The scene I just described was around 1970,
Yeah.
69, 70, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
I was born in 65. So I was very young. And all through my years, my grade school years, my high school years, there was very little mention of any type of gender nonconformity or anything. And if you were, you were queer, and queer was a slur those days
Indeed.
back, but that was the worst thing to be called. And it was horrible. And so, but I knew something was going on. And yet I loved sports. I played baseball, I played soccer, I played hockey. I just loved it. All
Yeah.
the time, that's what I would do. I would go out and my brother and I would play catch, or we would play with the kids in the street, or I would play on ball teams. And if I had time alone, I would throw a tennis ball against the wall of my house. All the time, or shoot hockey pucks in the garage. We had a real nice, little garage to play hockey in, and street hockey. That's all I did. That's all I wanted to do. I drew the logos of NHL teams in school. That was what I wanted to do, and I just fell in love with hockey. I got good at it. I really wanted to be an NHL player, as through the lens of an 8-year-old or 9-year-old boy.
Yeah. It's just so intense when you say, I knew at age 5 or at age 6 that I was breaking, I mean, not in a 5-year-old brain, but now as you're reflecting on it, that you're breaking gender norms, and like your desire to be Lois Lane and to be Superman, and that the what I call the propaganda of misogyny, because it's not a true fact. It is propaganda that we all buy into, that women are less. And if you're associated with being a woman, you are less. That is, and like you said, it's the worst thing you could be called. I mean, that is just violent sexist misogyny. And when it is, and as we can see, it's damaging for all of our society. It leaves us just in a jail that we locked ourselves into. And
Yeah,
for all of us, all genders, misogyny is horrible.
yeah,
And so you have these early memories. You love sports. You have loved athletics your whole life. You love, coaching and like lifting up other players. So I want to talk about where you were just a few days ago. I heard you took a trip to Washington, D.C. Can you tell us about your experience there, why you were there, why you chose to go there, and how your experience was?
well, I'm on a ACLU call list, and I pay attention to that. And they called me and said, "Hey, there's a Supreme Court case. It says do a transgender girls in sports, and would like to go down there?" And I said, "Of course, yeah, I'll be there." And I did that. I went down. I got there really early in the morning, but not quite early enough to get a seat to see the proceedings, but just had to be there. I feel I need to speak out on behalf of people that feel isolated, that feel that they don't belong. And sports is something that really helps you feel a belonging. I was so terrified that I would get caught. I knew what people did to queer people and gay, or people that they just thought was gay. Grade school and high school when I was growing up. I mean, it was visceral. It was violent, and it affected lives, and it was a horrible thing. And I didn't want that to happen to me. I didn't want to get laughed out of my locker room, or just, kind of driven away from something I
Mm-hmm.
loved. And it became not just something I loved, but it was a bit of a refuge for me. I didn't have to act like anybody there. I was a goalie. I stopped pucks. That's what I wanted to do. And I spent lots and lots of time doing that. I worked a job at a rink. Again, that was, I was able to work, and it is as early as age 14, and I started driving a Zamboni at 16. That consumed me, that gave me safe space, that I could be where I don't have to think about who this person is. And it was always in the back of my mind. There just wasn't any language for it, and it wasn't any representation for it. And anytime there was, It was negative. It was just tearing somebody down to shreds. There was
Yeah.
the one lady that sticks in my mind. There was an international model and actress named Caroline Rossi. Google this woman, was in a Bond movie, and just was, kind of an international star. People knew her, and was out since basically 16 and was stealth. And nobody knew that she was a transgender woman. And she was outed on a game show in England. The paparazzi outed to her
Oh
and
my
tried to
God.
blackmail her, and they outed her. And she was on the Inquirer at the time, and the Star, and all those, sheets and
Wow.
things, and her life was torn apart. Just really looked into the Johnny Carson show. The Tonight Show was the only late night show that was on, and she went on there and tried to explain herself and different things like that. And then she embraced it. She went into Playboy, she did a shoot for Playboy, different things like that. So she fought back, she sued, she had a lawyer for a husband, so that helped, but made things out of her life, and which was terrific. But it was, I saw myself, there was no way I wanted to go through that. And I did, so anything like that, if I even had any type of dream of that, I would never let myself do it. It was that bad. So I know those kids, I know what sports mean to kids. So back to
Yeah.
Washington, I think that, you even had one of the cases was a girl who blocked puberty, didn't go through male puberty. And West Virginia put a ban where it said no transgender girls, or theirs is no men allowed playing, no boys or
Right.
men. And so that's another whole subject matter as it is. But here's a girl just has friends on that team, wants to compete, and it's cross country. There's no size difference. She didn't go through puberty. So there's all kinds of things. It was just done based on sex. And if you ban people from activities and, sports or anything else based on sex, what's next? What's next? What else? You're going to ban, healthcare because of sex, and it's, they could say it's sex. So that's the argument that they can use. They're going to what there's all these different bills being put out there. There's over 1,000 in the last year and a half. It's insane, and they're all against trans people.
Yeah.
And it's, what am I going to do if I can't go to use women's bathrooms? I can use a gender neutral room, or a single use room, if I can find
Right.
one, or
Yep.
I'm using the men's. So how are my 38Ds going to play in a men's bathroom?
No, you're in
I don't
danger regardless where you go.
I
Yeah.
don't belong there. And
Right.
so that's why I was there. I wanted to support not just those two girls. I wanted to support all the trans people, especially the kids. When I came out, it was a very difficult process, and that was around the time where you know, right before I met you, and I was everything I thought about this entire time, just talking to my therapist, was I need to help the next person. There's more people than me. I'm not alone. I know that. Thankfully, thanks to the internet, thanks to different things, and thanks to my
Yes.
therapist, I wanted to help the next person. And the day I told her I was going to go on hormones and go through with this entire thing was the day I was at her office, and I passed by. I was getting water, and there was a little kid sitting there, probably 10 or 12 years old. And I couldn't tell if this kid was born female, born male. It just was just this beautiful young kid. And in a clinic that was, the biggest not gender non-conforming agency in the area, in our section of New York. So I go back into a room and said, I wish I'd have had this type of thing when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm seeing this 12-year-old there, or whatever, and I'm like, they get this opportunity to explore themselves and figure themselves out. And she
Yeah.
says, you are in a highly visible position, which I am. I'm the event manager at in hockey games and football games and everything else. There's big crowds, and you are going to be a role model to a lot of people. And you're going to be a role model to the students there. You're going to be a role model to staff. If people are going to see you, and you're going to you're going to be able to influence a lot of people. And I said, well, thank you. And I was just going to tell you, this is what I'm doing. And
Yeah.
I've just made that decision. And so I knew I wanted to help the next person right from the word go.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said and link it to what you just said here. You said when you were much younger, the biggest fear that you had was that someone, or the biggest fear that I guess everybody had, was if someone even thought you were queer, you were gay, you were not following the strict gender norms. And the mere accusation of that was so frightening. And so moving from, this intense fear that you're talking about as a much younger person to then going into and getting the treatment and the healthcare that you need, then being told at your first appointment, not only are you going to get your healthcare, but you are in a highly visible position without even wanting that. But now you are thrust into a spotlight as the assistant athletic director. Everybody sees you, every game, practices, events, like everything.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me, like, how do you, like, when you're thinking back to younger Brianne and like the fear of even being thought of as different in any way, and then like you do come out and you're suddenly so in the spotlight,
Yeah.
where did that fear go? How did you like move that fear into courage?
Once I realized absolutely who I was, once I realized I wasn't alone, once I realized there's people there that know who I am, like can see who I am, and that I didn't feel like I would be such a freak after a long time. I used to hide. I used to be on recruiting trips, recruiting, and a lot of different coaches from different schools would be around, and sometimes we would go to, have a drink afterwards, after the day full of games or something like that. And I did some of that. But then sometimes I'd let them go there, and then I would go sneak off to a gay bar because, again, in those days, I didn't have the internet. I didn't have any of this technology to figure out, to see who I could be. So I had to try to figure out myself from going to gay bars, and I was looking for the drag bars, the drag queen, the
Right,
shows, because I
right.
felt I thought I was probably a drag queen. I didn't know really any
Hmm.
different, really. And I just wanted to kind of find out what their story is, what is going on with that, like what brought them to this place, and just trying to figure out, is this me? And then I realized, listen, I can't dance, I can't perform, I'm scared to death to get on stage, so I'm not a drag queen. But I figured there's something there. I mean, they
Yeah,
just feel, and then I got to know some trans people and things. But even then, and I was in the 30s, so I'm talking about the 90s, like
yeah,
the 90s, early 2000s, when, around the time Pose was, the show Pose was set in
yep,
and things like that.
right. The setting of that show. Yeah.
There still wasn't a lot of visibility.
Mm.
And I just saw people, but those people, especially if they're people of color, they could not get a job in the daytime. It was it's weird. They would interview. I've been in conversations and they would interview, and they just couldn't, for a cashier's job, just the most entry level job you can find pretty much. And these people are smart people. They're not dumb, but if they're not able to get into, maybe working at the gay bar or something, and there's like countless people, then it's the drug trade or it's survival sex. And it was really difficult.
Yeah,
And I did not want to see myself in that either.
right.
I didn't even understand my privilege until those times, really. I
Mhm.
knew that in certain times I feel so ashamed of myself, but I realized where I'm at, and this is a lot of your work too, that you do all the time. But I made friends with a drag queen who was just a beautiful human, 6'4", not in heels. When she was always wearing heels, she was much taller, big but beautiful and talented, and made her own clothes and sang some of her songs where, like a lot of it's lip synced, and but
Mhm.
she was just a beautiful human. And so I'd see her every year when I go back. to Ohio to do hockey camps. And again, I'm sneaking away from the group and I'm
Right.
going to get this whole other world that I feel more of a part of. I felt, I could be myself there kind of. Anyway, we got to be friends. And one time I said, why don't we just go where we can talk and, where nobody's going to come and hit on you or anything like that. Why don't we just go and, have coffee sometime? And so we did. I picked her up and I made sure we went to a place that nobody that I knew would be there because I didn't want to be at that moment, at that time and place. I didn't want to be caught with her. And I drove home that day. I felt so freaking upset at myself. I just felt like here's somebody that's risking her life actually
Yep.
to hang out with a white dude, in plain daylight and all that kind of thing. And she's helping me immensely. And yet I was ashamed to be with her. And it just
Yeah.
made me sick. And I was so conflicted. And again, I had nobody to talk to about that. That had to stay in the vault. So it was difficult. Those are things that I think that people miss. And I think there's a lot of people that are hiding a lot of things. It could be almost all kinds of different things that happen in people's lives. So, but that was what I was carrying around. And I'm not sure if I veered off of that question or not.
No, it's perfect.
Yeah, I
Go
feel
ahead,
that
finish your thought. Yeah.
those are the things that made me want to do what I did and say, okay. And what really catapulted it is as time goes along, the internet's coming, I got info on my phone and I'm thinking, okay, this is me. I've got to get to that life. I can't just go into a coffee shop for a couple hours in a skirt and heels and look for everybody's there, hoping to God that nobody recognizes me, But pretty soon they recognize me because I'm a regular and
Right.
I'm doing that sort of thing. So I'm living two lives, and it
Yeah.
was starting to
Yep.
really. And the one life I wanted a lot more than the other,
Right.
and I couldn't get it. I was married. I loved my wife, and she got diagnosed with cancer. That happened. Then I knew if I'm going to be here, the second diagnosis was terminal. And we knew that. So I knew that if I was going to be there to care for her for the end till the end of her life, I needed to take care of mine. And that's when I started to get the therapy, and that's when things started to roll for me.
Yeah.
And
So there was a lot of like very determining moments. It's not like you had all this fear of being, perceived as anything other than just super gender conforming as growing up, and then all of a sudden you were out and in the spotlight. It was like it was an evolution, and all
it
of these
was,
pivotal moments of meeting people and having like the experiences of I'm not alone, and then of course later on
I write
realizing,
about a bunch of those scenarios in the book. I mean,
yeah.
there's people that I met with a trans woman, and we were kind of like in the same stage, and we, stepped out with each other. It was great. And there's just other different times where I see people just really just being in vulnerable situations. And then there's people that when I was in vulnerable situations, like when I used to go thrifting, and I still do, but I would look for things because I had to pay cash. I couldn't pay with credit card because credit card bills are going to come home. And then somebody would see that. My wife would see those and like, what is this? A skirt, a dress? What are you talking about? So I had to hide all that stuff. And that was getting old. That was starting to get really stressful. So there's all these things coming together, but it's, Jen at one of the thrift stores who was just so sweet. And everybody there were so nice to me. And hey, I walk in, got a dress you're going to love. It's going to fit you,
Oh,
all that. So it was, it was terrific. Matter of fact, one person was drunk. Actually, another visitor was drunk and I happened to be in the dressing room and I hear all this commotion outside and I'm getting ready to go out there and like help these girls because this guy's, he's drunk and he's getting loud and all this stuff. And one of the girls came back and said, hey, there's this guy. He's not going to like somebody like you. You should stay here and be safe. And I'm thinking,
oh,
okay, I'm getting ready to change back and get out there so you guys are more safe. it was weird. And just, but those people making sure like me was safe. Like those things actually just, those did more than I could even measure. Like
I bet, of
and there was
course.
plenty of those. I mean, it was just, I had two or three different thrift spots and coffee shops and things like that that I would be able to escape as I was getting there. The physical evolution started when I stopped wearing suits and ties to like the hockey games because I was the administrator of all these games. So I'm in charge. Sometimes I'm driving the Zamboni. And so I stopped wearing ties altogether. I started wearing vests. I started wearing a lot of androgynous type clothes. And
Hmm.
some of them were actually women's. And some people say, "Hey, I love that vest." I'm thinking, it's off the women's rack.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this is great. And so it was really great. And, some people just, I could tell thankfully at Union, they were very nice overall. I'm naive to think they're not talking about me behind my back sometimes, but overall, I can't complain a bit. I can be confident. I can walk into a room with all the people from facilities, all the trade workers and, the construction guys and all that stuff. I can do that because I have the confidence to do it now. And
Yeah,
I feel where in the past I didn't. I just
right.
didn't. And so that made things a lot easier.
There's two things that I want to clarify, and what the second one goes kind of way back to something you were saying. But you know, the you we as human beings cannot be ashamed when we live in our self-esteem and confidence. We cannot be bullied when we know who we are, and we are in it till the end. And I feel that way after like that metamorphosis happened for me after I came out. And I hear it in what you're saying. Like when you are standing in who you are, it no one can hurt you. You're your own
Yeah,
you're your own
it,
protection. And it's the truest protection
yeah,
is you
it
protecting
really is.
yourself.
It
Yeah.
really is.
The second thing I just want to make sure for our listeners is to make sure that they know and not from what you were saying. So I want to make sure that there's no confusion on the outside that sexual orientation, like who you have sex with and the anatomy of the person you're having sex with, which when you break it down like that sounds really absurd that we even think about sexual orientation. My dad one time said to me, "Why do we even have to have labels?" And I was like, "Exactly. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
But we have to have them because people don't have that realization yet. Why are we
right.
thinking about the anatomical parts of who people are having sex with? Like, that's really
Yeah,
weird." So when you said you went to gay bars, it's not because we're talking about your sexual orientation. It's because and I want to make sure that I'm correct. So it's because you were looking for any sort of community in the umbrella of queerness.
yes,
Okay.
100%.
And then gender identity or how you present on the outside is a lot of what we're talking about here.
Yes.
What clothes you feel comfortable in, what hairstyle you feel comfortable in. And
Yeah.
we all express our identity. I'm expressing my identity with this pink blouse and necklace and long black hair. You're expressing it with your long hair that's dyed pink on the ends, which is very pretty. And it actually matches your sweater blouse, which is also
Yeah.
dark pink. And we all express ourselves. Even if you think you don't express yourself through your clothes and you think, oh, I don't know anything about fashion, you are still expressing yourself because you're choosing what clothes mean something to you. So I just want to make that clear and I want to make sure I'm saying it right for what
100%.
you meant. Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Uh,
And even
Right.
so, even there, when I stepped out, once I got done with the androgynous stuff, I haven't worn gray. I rarely wear something gray. I wear
Yes.
nothing, very seldom black unless it's just, perfect. You know,
Right.
I now want to be seen.
Yeah.
People, and what I was, when I was stepping out to a campus, Pooja, with nobody else was trans. Nobody else was. There was out people. There were people that, did a lot of work through the years to try to help the LGBTQ community, but there was nobody really, out as a trans person. And so that was a little daunting, but I wanted to be seen because I knew there was more people there that, I did want to be seen. I just like my therapist said, I wanted those people to find me, to see me, to realize that they can do it. And I've had conversations in every lavender ceremony since that I, you know, I couldn't have made it without your, your presence, seeing you,
Yes.
those kinds of things. Because now we have a gender affirming floor, 24 beds. There's people all over the place, and I don't even know all of them. There's four or five, I think there's five faculty staff. So we're here. And I think it just, again, it just, you see somebody else, you see that, there could be a community there. And then you can thrive. Like
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not surviving anymore. I'm thriving. And
Right.
that's what is on the daily. So that's why I can get down to Washington and I can talk to people. And I go over to the other side because I want to hear what they're saying. I need to know what they're saying, what they're coming up with. And a lot of it that was coming out of those microphones were all lies. I went last year, it was the same guy up there, and he's saying the same thing about everybody having surgeries all the time, constantly, and everybody regrets it. And it's all bullshit. So
It really is remarkable.
it's unreal. But I did meet some people, and some people just wanted to talk, and some people wanted to just, they wanted to get to start off with the rhetoric, like kids are cutting their, genitals off and they're doing all these surgeries. And it's like, well, they're
Yeah,
not doing those
it's
surgeries.
absurd.
It's none of the states will allow that.
But all of this exaggeration is for what you said probably, at the beginning of or at the top of the podcast is when you target trans people and you make such a big deal about sex, even though there's no issues happening, it is the door, it's the gateway to healthcare, to housing, to education, to segregation, once again. And then, of course, along all skin color lines, which exacerbates it for Black and Brown trans folks, and then all of our Black and Brown communities. So it was really poignant when you said, the focus on anatomical sex is the gateway to control all populations. And that's why trans rights matters, not just for trans people, but for all of us. If you don't know your link to trans rights and you just think about your own backyard, well, I think you said this when we met the other day, it's coming to your doorstep too.
Yeah.
If you care about nothing else except your family, well, you're not exempt from any of this.
Yeah. And Pooja, I just know it from the people that approach me, the people I've spoken with, the people that I've met with families, just to sign the book, and we talked 2.5 hours, and just little things that are going to help this kid, or help. I had people at the book signings, moms show up with their tall son or was their son and now their daughter, and they just need this type of representation. They want to read what happened, all those kinds of things. So I was ready for that. I was ready for the kids. What I wasn't ready for was the 72-year-old people that come up to me and say, hey, I used to dress when I was a kid. I still feel that way. I'm so happy you're doing what you're doing and you're able to do it. My wife won't let me, but it's just all this kind of thing. And so it was going on back when I was a kid too. I wasn't the only one then, but it was just everybody was involved at that point. And some people still are, sadly.
Yes. Generations above you are, you know, so thankful that you wrote so vividly about your experiences and so clearly that, when you read the book, you're like, I'm walking with Brianne and I'm like, I'm with her in all of these situations. Like, that's how you write. You like invite the reader in. It's really accessible to like really imagine like where you were at.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. One thing you said, when we were talking earlier, and I want to transition into this because it's a beautiful way to sum all of this up. You said, of all the assumptions we're told not to make about other people, the assumption you should always make is that everyone is always going through something, and that something is probably invisible. So, can you talk to me about like what you mean? What do you mean you should assume that everyone is going through something?
Well, I just think that there's always things that people don't want to divulge to the general public, or just to anybody. I think everybody kind of likes, it seems to like their privacy. And I think that, there's things that they might feel vulnerable if certain information got out. Some people, maybe maybe their mom has, or a parent has a drinking problem, or somebody's, losing a job, or, you know, the mother's got a disease. I mean, something life-threatening. I think people carry around more than what they talk about. I really do. And the more that I just let my vulnerability go, and I'm being able to talk to people, I hear all these stories about, yeah, I'm anxious. Yes, I've got worries. I'm in big debt. I'm doing all these different things. I lost
Yes.
a family member. I lost a spouse. I lost a dog. I lost, those things are so personal. We have to go through those kinds of things. And maybe, somebody is getting bullied at work or whatever. I feel there's all kinds of different things, and it could be just anything. And you don't know what's going to actually trigger somebody that is going to throw somebody over the edge. And I would rather be on their side than not on their side. I don't want to be the
Yeah.
person that,
Right. Right.
pushes them away.
Right. Right. Yeah. Most of us try to have this exterior that everything's fine for
Yeah,
all sorts of reasons. And you just never know what's happening on the inside. And, we talk a lot about, in my work about invisible disabilities specifically, because you really don't, you can never know someone's capacity in that moment that you're meeting them. Either if they're like in the middle of, just weeks of anxiety that have just like really built up, or there's many other physical invisible disabilities that they're going through, or they just came out and they're really suffering. You just have no idea what people are
right.
going through. And your message of I, the first thing I thought is, how can I help others? And your message of compassion is just so strong. And it comes out, Brianne, every time we hang out and I meet you, it's like this like wave of fresh air, because it just exudes from you. It's one of the best things about you. And it's just, you just feel really cared for when I'm in your presence. That's how I feel. And I just feel very lucky that we met 5 years ago, almost six
Something
years
like
ago.
that, 5 or 6. Yeah,
Yeah, six
it's been
years
a
ago.
while.
And yeah, you're just wonderful. I want to thank you so much for giving your time to me, to this podcast, and you're just great. So there's one thing I do want to end on, but the book is called Skating Out of the Vault, A Trans Woman's Escape from the Game of Masculinity. We should have it up here on the screen for you to see if you're watching this, but buy it at your local bookstore. They can order it for you. You can, of course, get it from any of the very popular bookstores as well, but we always want to support our local independent bookstores.
Totally.
There's one last thing, and I don't know if you know what I'm going to ask you about, but a few years ago, something very special happened on the ice. And can you tell us about what Lore did, who Lore is, and what they did, and tell us what happened?
Yes, I'd be happy to. This is a fun story. Shortly after my wife died, there was a team called a hockey team called Team Trans, and they had played in Boston like 2 years before, and then COVID happened. And I found them on Facebook. I knew one of the players, and because they were from the Albany area, now lives in Wisconsin. And so they put together this big friendship series, and just trans people. And we put together a team called Team Trans. And I was dying to get on that team. Even before I came out, I thought, okay, that's one thing. Because I kind of stopped playing hockey. I got tired of the machismo and all that. So anyway, I get in there, and this is a month after Marianne's funeral. And I go in there, and there was 47 trans people in one rink, in the locker room and on the ice. And it was like just an amazing thing. And I met so many people, and I'm very close and good friends with many of them to this day. And one of the people I met was Laura. And Laura was there, and Laura was a goalie at just beginning, and just had come out as non-binary. And we got to know each other, and we just, you know, we just kind of hit it off a little bit. And then we met in Vegas, and because we one of the team traveled to Vegas, whoever wanted to play in this tournament, and representing trans. We played in Vegas. So Laura was there. So we got to know each other. And fast forward another year or so to another friendship series. And this time there's 70 people on the ice and we're at practice. And during a drill, they asked me to, they mic'd up myself, Laura, and somebody else up because they were saying that the NHL network wants to record this. They're doing a thing. And okay, that's what I did. And so I'm demonstrating a drill, and Laura happened to be the other person demonstrating. And I, get the puck and I pass it, and I'm skating past the goalie, and Laura is down on it, like ends up on a knee and said, "Hey, get over here." I'm like, I didn't know what was going on. I completely had no idea. I didn't know what was happening. And then it turns out in her glove was her cell phone and a ring, and had to read it because they were so nervous but it was amazing, and it was recorded, and it was such a thing to be in that company of all these, like some of dear friends. Some people were just meeting for the first time, but it was just everybody's there for just an amazing reason. So it was a great moment. I kind of felt that might have been coming, but not on the ice. That one I
You
didn't
knew.
know they were gonna stage something like that, and went through and this is somebody that for up till that point had a hard time keeping secrets, at least from my perspective. And it was great. And it was really terrific.
A proposal on the ice. You know, I mean, can you imagine back to your Kent State days? You're playing on the ice or at home on the ice, and decades later, that's where you get proposed to. I mean, that's so beautiful.
It was just a cool way to do it. And it's probably going to be way more bigger than what our wedding's going to be. It's probably going to be small, and that's going to come up pretty soon. We still don't know exactly when, but it's definitely coming. But yeah, it was quite a moment. It was once when I was actually speechless. I said, sure. And I
Here.
had nothing else. I was like, wow. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. Brianne, you're brilliant. Read her book, reach out to Brianne. She's phenomenal. If you get to be in her presence, you'll be so glad you did. Thank you so much, Brianne. I wish you all the best, and I'll probably be texting you later anyway. So thank you so
Thank
much
you,
for your
Pooja. And
time.
I also feel you're very brilliant. You are a part of who I've become. And the reason I say that is shortly after I met you, but I was when we met at one of your workshops, and I just saw how you put things out there, and you were able to discuss your vulnerability, and that stuck. That was the most
Mm.
impactful thing. And I feel that that's why I can say pretty much anything about me and not have a single secret. And thank you for that. You're just you're brilliant, and everybody should be seeing your stuff. You're great. I think a lot of
Oh,
you. And so I really appreciate you having me on.
yeah, thank you. The feeling's very mutual. Well, I wish you all the best, and we'll be in touch soon. And for everybody listening, thanks for joining us today on Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change.
Thanks for joining us on Everyday Equity, Everyday Ways to Make a Change. If today's conversation inspired you, keep the momentum going. Connect with us on LinkedIn at Boundless Awareness, subscribe to our YouTube at Boundless Awareness, and explore more free resources to support your anti-oppression journey at boundlessawareness.com. Remember, progress isn't about perfection. It's about showing up every day with curiosity, compassion, and the courage to do a little better. I'm Pooja Kothari, and I can't wait to keep learning and growing with you right here on Everyday Equity.